At precisely 9:42 a.m., in a quiet train station just outside Bend, Oregon, a German shepherd named Shadow stopped dead in his tracks and started barking like the devil himself. Officer Matt Langley knew that bark. It wasn't frustration, it wasn't boredom. It was a warning, a gut punch kind of bark that said, something's wrong here. At first glance, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Just a young couple, a man and a woman, pushing a stroller with a sleeping infant bundled inside and a little girl, maybe 4 years old, holding the woman's hand. They could have been any suburban family heading off on a trip. But Shadow didn't buy it. He circled them once, stiff-legged, nose high, ears alert. Then he planted himself right in front of them, growling low. Matt stepped forward. "Sorry to bother you," he said, voice calm but firm. "My canine partner is trained to detect stress and certain substances. Just need to ask a few quick questions." The woman's smile was thin and shaky. "Of course, officer. We're just trying to catch the 10 o'clock northbound." The man tightened his grip on the stroller handle. "Is this really necessary?" Shadow let out another loud bark, loud enough that a few heads turned from the platform. Matt held up his badge. "May I see some identification, sir?" The man sighed, annoyed, but produced a wallet. The woman reached into a purse and pulled out a small stack of papers. Matt took the documents and stepped aside, just enough to radio dispatch discreetly. "Unit 2, I've got a canine alert on a family unit at Bend Station. One male, one female, one child, one infant. Requesting immediate backup for ID verification." Dispatch crackled. "Copy that, Unit 2. Backup en route." Matt returned his attention to the couple. The IDs read Todd Granger and Melissa Granger, married, Oregon residents. But something felt off. The little girl wasn't talking. She clutched a worn-out stuffed bunny to her chest and avoided everyone's eyes. Her shoes didn't match, and her hair looked like it hadn't been brushed in days. "You said this is your daughter?" Matt asked gently. Melissa nodded. "Yes, this is Lily. She's a little shy." "And the baby?" "Our son, 2 months old," Todd replied quickly. "He's sleeping." Matt crouched down, level with Lily. "Hi there, I like your bunny. What's his name?" The girl mumbled something too soft to hear. "Is it okay if I talk to your mommy and daddy for a bit?" She looked up at Melissa, then back to Matt. Her lip trembled. Then in a tiny whisper she said, "They're not my mommy and daddy." Melissa gasped. Todd shot her a deadly glance. Matt's stomach dropped. "Can you tell me who they are?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle. Lily shook her head. "They told me to call him that, said I had to." Shadow growled again, louder this time. Not at the girl, but at Todd, who had taken one step backward, his hands subtly shifting toward his waistband. "Don't move," Matt snapped, drawing his weapon. "Hands where I can see them." Todd froze. Within minutes, backup arrived. Officers separated the couple, secured the scene, and escorted them, along with the children, to the nearby precinct. But Shadow wouldn't stop pacing around the stroller. Something about it still had him on edge. "Let's take a look," Matt said, and carefully lifted the sleeping infant from the stroller. The baby was warm, but unnaturally still. A quick medical check confirmed the worst suspicion. He had been sedated. That was no ordinary nap. Back at the station, the investigation accelerated. The documents Melissa handed over, forged. Their home address didn't exist. Fingerprints, wiped. The man and woman, once calm and composed, now sat in separate holding cells. Todd refused to speak. Melissa cried over and over. "We were just taking care of them. We were supposed to hand them off." "Hand them off to who?" Matt asked. She stayed quiet. Meanwhile, Lily had been placed with child services. A forensic nurse examining her found bruises along her arms, signs of prolonged travel, and no verifiable birth certificate or records. No known relatives, no school history, nothing. She was, for all legal purposes, a ghost child. Shadow, resting near Matt's desk, lifted his head every time someone walked by with evidence. His eyes were locked onto the stroller, which had been brought into evidence. "You did good, buddy," Matt whispered, giving him a pat. Shadow leaned into it, tail wagging slightly. Later that afternoon, a tech discovered something strange. Tucked beneath the stroller's padding was a sealed pouch. Inside it, 5 prepaid burner phones and a small USB drive. The contents? Dozens of photos. Children, all under 10, most asleep, some restrained. File names with initials. GPS metadata from across state lines. This wasn't just an abduction. It was a pipeline. By nightfall, a joint task force had been assembled. DHS, FBI, and local law enforcement across 3 states. Shadow was resting, but Matt couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the moment in his mind. How easily that couple could have disappeared on the 10 a.m. train. How no one else at the station had noticed anything strange. If it weren't for Shadow, that dog's instinct didn't just interrupt a kidnapping. It cracked open a nightmare. And something told Matt this was only the beginning. Melissa Granger was shaking. Not the kind of shaking that came from nerves. This was deeper, colder. The kind that only hit when the lie you've been repeating finally stopped working. She sat alone in interrogation room B, hands trembling in her lap. Her blonde hair was frizzed from stress, and the tears had dried into pale streaks across her cheeks. Her only audience now was the dull buzzing of the overhead fluorescent light and the pressure. Across the building, Officer Matt Langley watched through a tinted glass panel while Shadow lay quietly at his feet, still alert, ears perked. The German Shepherd hadn't taken his eyes off the door since they brought Melissa in. "She's cracked already," said Detective Ari Monroe, stepping beside Matt. "Been asking for a lawyer, then crying, then whispering, 'I didn't take them. I only moved them.' Over and over again." Matt folded his arms. "That sounds like guilt talking." Monroe glanced down at Shadow. "Your dog has one hell of a nose." Matt nodded. "He's not just sniffing for drugs or explosives. He picks up on adrenaline spikes, fear, stress hormones. The second he barked at that couple, I knew something was off." He turned his gaze toward interrogation room A, where Todd Granger sat hunched over the steel table, jaw clenched, refusing to speak. His eyes were locked on a fixed point in the corner, his entire posture radiating a quiet rage. No emotion, no concern, just anger. That silence said more than any confession ever could. Meanwhile, in a brightly lit room down the hall, Lily sat cross-legged on a padded bench, coloring quietly. A CPS counselor named Jordan had offered her crayons in a juice box. Lily hadn't said much since she'd arrived, but she'd let the woman brush her hair and check her arms for bruises. Jordan had gently asked if she wanted to talk. Lily only looked up and asked, "Is Bunny safe?" Jordan smiled and brought over the stuffed bunny, gently worn, one ear hanging by a thread. "Of course, he's right here." Lily hugged the toy tight and finally whispered, "They told me not to talk." Jordan leaned in, patient. "Who told you that, sweetie?" Lily looked away. "The lady and the man said I'd get in trouble, that I'd have to go back in the closet." Jordan froze. "Closet?" Lily nodded slowly. "The dark place with the beep-beep sound." "What beep-beep?" "The thing on the wall with the numbers." Jordan's blood ran cold. A keypad. This wasn't a babysitting situation gone wrong. This was organized. Back in the evidence room, forensic techs finished analyzing the contents of the USB drive found in the stroller. There were over 60 photos, children all under the age of 10. Some were in beds, some on couches. One appeared to be in the trunk of a car, asleep with a pacifier still in his mouth. But worse were the folders. Each was labeled with initials, birth dates, and a string of numbers that resembled routing codes or IDs. Some even had notes like allergy peanut or delivery delayed 921. And there it was again, the same name in the metadata, Monroe, over and over. Not Detective Monroe, someone else using the alias. A forensic analyst named Candace scrolled further and spotted file trails leading to a cloud-based platform, likely password protected but currently active. If they could trace the IP, "Can you run a trace?" Matt asked. "We're trying, but it's routed through 3 VPNs and a proxy server bouncing out of Nevada," Candace replied. Shadow growled quietly behind Matt. "You smell something?" he asked, kneeling. Shadow's nose was pressed against a large plastic evidence bag on the table. It held the baby blanket from the stroller. Matt opened the outer bag carefully and brought the blanket closer. Shadow sniffed, then immediately sat and let out 2 sharp barks. "Alert," Matt said. "What's on it?" Candace waved over another tech. They ran a rapid field test. A few minutes later, the screen flashed red. Midazolam. Hazam, a powerful sedative used in hospitals. That baby hadn't just been sleeping. He'd been chemically put under. And someone had access to hospital-grade medication. Todd finally broke his silence later that evening, but only after seeing a photo of the baby projected on the wall across from him. He stared at it for a full minute, jaw working, hands clenched. Then he leaned forward and muttered, "You're wasting time. We're just the in-between. You don't want us." "Who do we want?" Monroe asked. Todd smirked, a twisted kind of satisfaction creeping across his face. "You'll never get close. He's never in the same place twice." "Who is he?" "He doesn't use names, calls himself Monroe." Matt stiffened. "What did you say?" he asked from the observation booth, storming into the room. "Monroe?" Todd repeated. Yeah, creepy guy, real precise. Sends texts with delivery schedules, pays in Bitcoin. We've only seen him once. And you were delivering, what, children? Todd didn't answer. Matt stepped closer. You drugged a baby. You coached a 4-year-old to lie. You locked her in a closet with a key padlock. You want to talk about wasting time? Silence. Then Todd laughed. They weren't ours to begin with. Shadow's alert had blown the case wide open. The department brought in federal agents. Every burner phone was cloned and traced. Each number matched messages across 4 different states. The common thread? Drop locations near transit stations and rental properties. Matt watched the map light up with pinpoints. Seattle, Boise, Salt Lake, Reno, and even Las Vegas. Shadow sat by the board, eyes following the red markers like he understood every word. This was never about just one kid, Monroe said quietly. This was a system. And we interrupted a transfer, Matt replied, which means they'll try again somewhere else. Matt's phone buzzed. A new tip, an anonymous one, claimed another child was being held at a warehouse in Tacoma. The text simply read, next pickup in 48 hours, same handler. It was signed with a symbol. Matt showed it to Shadow. What do you say, partner? You ready to finish what you started? Shadow stood, tail low, body tense, ready. By the time the unmarked SUV pulled into the outskirts of Tacoma, the sky had gone from cloudy gray to steel blue. Rain clung to the windows like sweat, blurring the warehouse district into a sad sprawl of corrugated steel and chain-link fences. Officer Matt Langley gripped the steering wheel tighter as he scanned the numbered buildings. 1428, 1430, there. He tapped the brakes and rolled slowly to a stop across the street from a rust-colored building that looked like it hadn't seen a functioning light bulb since 1996. Canine Shadow sat upright in the back seat, ears alert, eyes sharp, tail still. You feel it too, huh? Matt asked quietly. Shadow let out a low huff, as if confirming it. The tip had come through a secure channel used by federal task forces. Anonymous message. Precise address. Pickup scheduled within 48 hours. Same handler, same pattern. It was too detailed to ignore and too dangerous not to act on. A second SUV pulled in behind them. Detective Ari Monroe stepped out, already buttoning his vest. You ready for this? He asked. Matt nodded, shadows on. They moved in with a small tactical team. 4 officers in full gear, no lights, no sirens. This was quiet work, controlled entry. The goal, rescue, not confrontation. The warehouse appeared deserted. Rust streaked down the metal siding. The roll-up doors were bolted shut. The office entrance had one flickering camera overhead and a keypad lock. Shadow, Matt called softly, clicking his tongue. The German Shepherd leapt from the SUV, nose to the ground instantly. He sniffed the base of the door, then the keypad. His body stiffened. 2 short barks. Alert! Monroe nodded to the tech guy who stepped forward with a portable scanner. Standard 4-digit input, he muttered. We can brute force this in about 5. Shadow began pacing, circling the front office. At the corner of the building, he stopped and barked again, this time louder, sharper. Side entrance, Matt said. Let's move. They fanned out, covering both angles. Shadow pressed against the side door, nose right against the crack. His claws scraped the cement floor, agitated. He's signaling again, Matt whispered. There's movement inside. A muffled thud came from behind the door. Battering ram, Monroe ordered. One officer stepped forward. One hit. Then another. The door gave way with a rusty shriek. Shadow charged in, teeth bared, not to bite but to lead. The first room was dim, filled with stacked cardboard boxes, expired canned goods, and broken filing cabinets. A faint buzzing sound came from the far end, fluorescent lights maybe. Shadow didn't stop. He darted through a narrow hallway and into a large open space in the back. Matt followed close behind. That's when they saw it. A dozen cages, each one barely large enough for a child to sit upright. Most were empty, but 3 were occupied. 2 boys and 1 girl, none older than 7, sedated, pale. One of the boys had a medical ID bracelet on his wrist with someone else's name. Oh my God, Monroe muttered, rushing in behind Matt. Matt dropped to his knees and gently reached into one of the cages. Easy, easy, buddy, you're safe now. The boy whimpered but didn't open his eyes. Officers moved quickly, cutting the locks, calling in paramedics. Shadow stood guard near the doorway, tail rigid, growling softly toward a back curtain. Matt noticed and moved closer. What is it, boy? Shadow barked once. Matt yanked the curtain back. A man sat at a desk, surrounded by computer monitors and shipping labels. His eyes went wide. I didn't hurt anyone. Shadow lunged with a snarl that shook the walls. The man raised his hands and screamed. Matt pulled Shadow back and cuffed the guy. "You're done," he said, "and we're just getting started." Back at the precinct, it took hours to process the scene. The children were transported to a local hospital. All three were suffering from dehydration, sedative exposure, and signs of long-term neglect. They'd been missing from different states, Idaho, Montana, and Arizona. None were related. None had been reported missing by family, because all three were in foster care when they vanished. Monroe paced in the evidence room, flipping through the shipping manifests they'd seized. This wasn't just some pop-up operation. This was a full-scale supply chain, scheduled deliveries, handler notes, sedation instructions, fake parental paperwork. "Who's behind it?" Matt asked. The guy in the back office, a low-level coordinator named Eric Klein, had been recruited online through encrypted chat boards, paid in Bitcoin, never knew the real names of anyone above him. His only job was to receive, document, and prep for transfer. "He said he was expecting another 2 kids by Friday," Monroe said, slamming a binder shut. "We need to find them before they arrive." Matt nodded grimly. "Let's let Shadow take a look at the other building photos. Maybe he'll recognize something." Later that evening, Shadow stood in front of the evidence board. He sniffed a printed image of a different warehouse, this one in Nevada, then another near the Arizona border. He sat in front of the third photo and gave a short, low bark. "Is that a hit?" Monroe asked. Matt knelt beside his partner. "You recognize something?" Shadow stared at the photo. It was a truck depot, abandoned years ago, used for cargo shipments once, located 3 miles outside a quiet desert town. No traffic, no cameras. Monroe leaned in. "Let's run it. If Shadow says go, we go." As night turned into dawn, Matt sat alone with Shadow on the station steps, coffee in hand, staring into the quiet cityscape. "I'll be honest, buddy," he said softly. "This is darker than I thought. You sure you're up for more?" Shadow rested his head on Matt's knee and let out a soft, content breath. It wasn't a yes, it was a promise. Somewhere out there, more kids were waiting. And Shadow wasn't done yet. The sun hadn't even risen yet when the convoy of unmarked vehicles rolled into the dust-swept outskirts of Tonopah, Nevada. Dry tumbleweeds skittered across the cracked pavement like something alive. In the distance, the silhouette of an old truck depot stood against the gray-blue sky, hollowed out, isolated, and forgotten. Officer Matt Langley tightened his grip on the steering wheel as the building came into view. The place looked like it hadn't been touched since the early 2000s. Graffiti peeling, windows boarded, a sagging sign that once read Speedline Freight. Now it just said Dead Freight. In the back seat, Shadow, his loyal K9 partner, sat alert and focused. His tail didn't move. His nose twitched. And when the car slowed to a stop, he gave a single, deep growl. "He knows," Matt muttered. Detective Ari Monroe stepped out of the SUV behind him. "This is the kind of place people don't stumble into. Whoever's using it, this is intentional." The team geared up, no lights, no sirens, quiet approach. Matt clipped the leash onto Shadow's tactical vest, whispered "seek," and the dog immediately took off, nose to the ground. The depot's front door was warped and padlocked. Officers circled around the back. Then Shadow stopped. His ears perked. He sniffed a small patch of dirt near a side foundation wall and began pawing at the ground. Matt moved in closer. "What is it, boy?" Shadow gave 2 short barks. "Alert!" They broke in through a rusted side entrance. Inside, the depot was a graveyard of old tires, dust-covered pallets, and busted shelving. The air smelled like mold, grease, and something else. Chemical, faint but undeniable. Shadow led them through the narrow hallways until they came to a large open bay, once used for truck loading. That's when he stopped and started barking. Loud, forceful, urgent. At first glance, the floor was ordinary concrete, but Shadow wouldn't stop pacing. He kept circling one particular spot, then he sat and stared at the ground. Monroe stepped forward. "Get the ground scanner." A technician rolled in a portable GPR unit and started sweeping the floor. Ping! Then another. Underneath the concrete slab was a void, roughly 6 feet deep, 10 feet wide. "Someone poured a false floor over a cavity," the tech said. "That's a hidden room." Matt's heart dropped. "We need to break it." They brought in the jackhammers. Concrete split, dust filled the air, and then, beneath a layer of boards, they found it. A metal hatch, bolted shut with a coated lock. Shadow barked again and stepped back. Monroe crouched, flashlight aimed. Whoever built this knew exactly what they were doing. Matt turned to the tech. Can you crack it? Already on it. It took 7 minutes. The lock clicked. The hatch creaked open, and what they saw inside would haunt them forever. The ladder descended into a square bunker, dimly lit with battery-powered lanterns. There were 4 small mattresses on the floor, a bucket for a toilet, shelves of children's clothes, diapers, wipes, crayons, juice boxes, all new, all clean. The space was cold, too clean, too quiet. It wasn't abandoned. It was prepped. Someone's expecting more kids, Matt said quietly, his voice hollow. Monroe nodded grimly. This isn't a holding area. This is inventory management. Suddenly, from a corner speaker on the wall, a beep echoed. Then a voice crackled through, distorted, modulated. You're early, it said. I suggest you leave. Officers froze. The voice continued, calm and cold. There are cameras. There are timers. Walk away, or you won't find the others. Monroe yanked the speaker out of the wall, smashing it. Get digital forensics in here now. Trace that feed. Matt looked at Shadow, who was now growling low, staring at a crawlspace vent in the corner. The dog stepped forward and pawed at it. Matt crouched, opened the grate. Inside, barely visible, was a duffel bag. He pulled it out. Inside, 3 folded sets of children's clothing, passports, prepaid phones, and a ledger. Each page had dates, initials, and amounts. This is the delivery schedule, Matt said, and there's another drop tomorrow. Monroe flipped through the pages. Nevada, Utah, Oregon, Washington, it's a circuit. Then one name jumped out. Lily M., date, 2 days ago, status, in transit, completed. Matt's hands tightened. They had a whole plan for her. She was a product. Monroe stared at him. Not anymore. Back at the precinct, Matt sat at his desk with Shadow curled at his feet. The evidence team had brought in everything: computers, cameras, ledgers, even a hidden GPS tracker from the hatch. The voice on the speaker was still untraced, but the ledger gave them more than expected. It wasn't just kids being trafficked. It was an adoption scam ring, pairing stolen children with fake birth records, sold to buyers across the U.S. and overseas as closed adoptions. Legit on the surface, rotten underneath. Matt looked over the list again. Over 30 children. Some names had red stamps, lost. Some, retrieved. The rest, pending. Then a new name appeared in his inbox, emailed from an encrypted account. AJ, drop confirmed. Bunker reset. Next inbound, 2 kids, ETA 36 hours. Monroe will handle. Matt read it again. Monroe will handle. His blood ran cold. He turned to the hallway where Monroe was just stepping out of the evidence room, wiping his hands. Hey, Matt called. Got a sec? Monroe stopped. Yeah? Matt stared at him. You ever use aliases in undercover work? Monroe blinked. Plenty. Why? Matt held up the message. This one says you'll handle the next drop. A long pause. Then Monroe gave a slow smile. That's what they think. He took the phone and handed it to the tech team. Let them think I'm still their guy. We'll set up the sting from the inside. Matt stared at him for a beat, then nodded. Let's bring it down. Shadow gave a short bark from the floor. As if to say, about time. The desert was still, too still. From a distance, the old auto body shop just off Route 93 looked like every other rundown business in the Nevada heat. Dusty signage, sun-faded paint, a couple of junker cars out front. But inside, behind closed bay doors and boarded-up windows, a sting operation was in motion. Officer Matt Langley stood behind a blacked-out van across the lot, eyes locked on the entrance. Beside him, Canine Shadow sat alert, his body tense. The dog's ears flicked with every faint sound, distant cicadas, a passing semi, the low hum of a generator inside the building. You ready, partner? Matt whispered. Shadow didn't look away, just gave a soft huff. That was his yes. 36 hours earlier, the encrypted message had confirmed what Matt feared. 2 more children were inbound. The delivery was scheduled for Friday afternoon and the handler listed in the communication. Monroe. At first, Matt had nearly drawn his weapon. But Detective Ari Monroe had stayed calm. They're using my alias, probably from an old UC op. If they think I'm still active, we can use that, flip the trap on them. It was risky, but it was the best lead they had. The plan? Let the delivery happen under surveillance. Set up a decoy team inside the shop. Intercept the children. Catch the handler. Then follow the chain up to whoever was giving orders. Now, as the sun beat down on the cracked pavement, the team was in place. Inside the shop, 2 agents posing as traffickers waited in street clothes, armed with discreet comms and body cams. They had been briefed not to spook the suspect, let them talk, let them believe the drop was proceeding as planned. A child services transport van, disguised, was stationed nearby. Two trauma specialists sat inside waiting to receive any recovered children. Shadow paced once and stopped. Then suddenly he let out a low growl. Matt followed his gaze down the long dirt road leading into the back of the property. A dust cloud. Then a gray Dodge Caravan appeared, moving slowly, carefully. It paused before pulling onto the lot. Matt radioed, "Target vehicle arriving, gray Caravan. Shadows alerting, eyes up." The van came to a full stop. The engine turned off. And then the driver's door opened. A man stepped out, mid-50s, tan work shirt, cap pulled low. Not someone from the registry. Not someone they had in their database. He walked around to the side door, opened it, and pulled out a duffel bag. Then he reached in again and helped out a child. The girl was maybe 5, blonde, barefoot. She looked dazed, wobbly. The man guided her forward, then reached in once more. Out came a second child, a boy, maybe 3. He was carried, head resting limply on the man's shoulder. Matt's jaw clenched. "All units hold," came Monroe's voice over comms. "Let him go inside. We need the full transaction recorded." The man walked toward the building, knocking once on the steel side door. It opened slowly. The undercover agent nodded. The man walked in. Matt and Shadow waited. 5 seconds. 10. Then came the signal. "Go, go, go." The raid was clean and fast. The man barely had time to blink before he was tackled to the ground. Agents secured the children immediately. The little girl began to scream, a sharp, panicked wail. But the trauma specialist wrapped her in a blanket and whispered gently. The boy didn't move. Matt ran inside with Shadow on his heels. The kids were already being carried out. The man was cuffed, face down, breathing hard. "I was just the driver, just the delivery. I don't know anything else." Shadow suddenly lunged, barking viciously. Matt pulled him back. "What is it, boy?" The dog's nose was aimed at the duffel bag the man had carried in. Inside, besides clothes and baby formula, was a folded piece of paper. Matt opened it. Typed, single line. "Let the dog find them, if he's as good as they say." There was no signature, no name. Just a symbol in the corner. Back at the precinct, the man, identified as Daniel Voss, a long-haul trucker from Arizona, folded under pressure. He claimed he was paid anonymously via crypto. Pickups were prearranged. He never asked questions. "They told me the kids were part of a private adoption," he muttered. Said the buyers were already screened. Doctors, lawyers, people who couldn't have their own. Matt stared at him. "You thought that sounded normal?" Daniel shook his head slowly. "It didn't feel right, but I needed the money. My wife's sick. I wasn't thinking straight." Matt looked down at the letter again. "Let the dog find them." "Who's they?" he asked. Daniel hesitated. "They never gave a name, just Monroe." The room went quiet. Matt turned to the surveillance board. All the names, all the aliases, all the drops. They were connected. But whoever was running the operation stayed in the shadows, watching, testing them. And now they were testing Shadow. Later that evening, Matt sat alone in his office, the weight of it all crushing his shoulders. Shadow lay at his feet, calm now, but not asleep. A knock came at the door. It was Candace from Digital Forensics. "You're going to want to see this," she said. She placed a printed transcript on the desk. "That GPS tracker from the last bunker? It just pinged." Matt scanned the coordinates. Oregon, near the same train station where Shadow first barked at the Grangers. "You're kidding." Candace shook her head. "We ran drone imaging. There's a small cabin there. Looks abandoned. But the heat signature says otherwise. Someone's in there." Matt stood slowly. "We're going." He clipped on Shadow's vest. The dog stood instantly, eyes sharp again. "No hesitation, huh?" Matt whispered. Shadow gave a low, steady bark. No hesitation, just purpose. It had been exactly 8 days since K9 Shadow first barked at the Grangers at the Southridge train station. 8 days since a routine patrol spiraled into a full-blown federal investigation involving stolen children, underground bunkers, and a digital trail of traffickers hiding behind adoption paperwork and fake identities. Now, the trail had led Officer Matt Langley and his loyal K9 partner back to where it all started. Only this time, they weren't walking the platform. They were hiking through a patch of thick trees behind it, guided by GPS coordinates that pinged from a hidden tracker found in the Nevada bunker. The location? A cabin in the woods, half a mile beyond the tracks, completely off the grid. Shadow was already ahead of him, weaving through tree roots, snout low, tail stiff. Matt adjusted the strap on his vest, heart pounding. Let's find out who's watching. The sun was just starting to dip below the treetops when they spotted it. A weathered wood cabin, small and silent, nestled between thick pine trees. Its roof was sagging, chimney crooked, and one shutter hung loose like a broken arm. It looked abandoned, too abandoned. Matt held his hand up, signaling the two agents behind him to hang back. He unclipped Shadow's leash and whispered, "Seek." The dog moved forward slowly, nose twitching. He didn't bark, didn't growl, but he kept walking, straight toward the porch. Matt followed close behind, every step measured, eyes scanning for movement. The front door was closed, but not locked. A thin line of light peeked through the bottom. Shadow stopped and looked back at him. Matt nodded, pushed the door open. It creaked. Inside, the cabin was unexpectedly modernized. The walls had been insulated. The wood floor was covered in clean rugs. In the center of the room, a metal desk faced 3 monitors glowing with static. A laptop sat closed, still warm. Next to it, a baby monitor quietly buzzed. Matt stepped inside cautiously, flashlight drawn. Shadow sniffed the air, circled once, then moved toward a narrow hallway. "Clear the main room," Matt said to the agents. "Shadow's onto something." The hallway led to a small bedroom. Inside, neatly folded bedding, a closet with several child-sized jackets, and on the bed, a photograph. Matt picked it up. It showed Lily, the little girl from the train station, sitting next to 2 other children. One boy, one girl, both unfamiliar. All 3 smiling. The back of the photo was labeled in pencil. "He took the others, but I kept him." Matt's breath caught. He turned to Shadow. "What does that mean?" The dog suddenly barked, loud and sharp, his body facing the floorboards near the closet. He began digging at the baseboard. Matt dropped to his knees, felt along the floor. His fingers found a small notch, then a hidden handle. He yanked. A square hatch popped open. Darkness below. A faint clicking sound echoed up. Matt turned on his flashlight and peered inside. A ladder led into a small underground room. "Stay here," he said to the team. "Shadow and I will go first." The air was cold and stale. The room below was barely 6 feet tall. A single cot sat against the far wall. On it, a boy, maybe 10 years old, was curled up, wrapped in a blanket, staring straight ahead. He didn't move, didn't speak. Shadow approached slowly, tail lowered, head tilted. The boy blinked, then whispered. He said if I was quiet, I could stay. Matt knelt beside him. "It's okay, buddy. You're safe now." The boy looked at Shadow. "Is that the good dog?" Matt smiled. "The best." Back upstairs, the agents recovered 3 external hard drives, stacks of passports, burner phones, and a journal. It wasn't written like a criminal manifesto. It read like a diary, a twisted one. Page after page outlined movements, pickups, behavior logs. Child number 7, cried during sedation. Child number 10, asked about parents, removed early. But one line stood out. Shadow is disrupting the cycle. We need to reset the field. One final move before the trail goes cold. Matt stared at the page. They were watching him, watching Shadow. And someone had taken the others, but left this boy behind. Why? The boy, whose name was Eli, didn't remember much, just flashes. A man with a scar on his hand, a windowless van, a room with books, and a ticking clock. He said I was special. He said I didn't have to go like the others. Matt's stomach turned. Was Eli being groomed for something else? Or had the trafficker grown attached? Whatever the reason, one thing was clear. There were more kids. And they were still out there. That night, back at the precinct, Eli was placed into protective custody. He asked if Shadow could stay with him for a while. Matt obliged. The boy fell asleep with his hand resting gently on the dog's fur. Meanwhile, forensics began working through the hard drives. Hours later, they called Matt into the tech room. "You're going to want to see this," one agent said. They pulled up a folder titled Long Term. Inside, video logs, surveillance footage of children in bunkers, dated, time-stamped, GPS coordinates embedded. Then a still photo, a group of children, maybe 6 total, in what looked like an abandoned mine shaft. One of the girls matched a missing person flyer from Montana. Matt pointed to the GPS. "Where is this?" The tech typed quickly. The result? Central Washington, near the Columbia River Gorge. Matt stood, adrenaline spiking. They're still alive. He looked down at Shadow, who had just walked in. The dog's eyes were locked on the screen. Matt clenched his jaw. "We're going." Shadow gave a single, strong bark. The air in the Columbia River Gorge was sharper than Matt remembered. Wet, mossy, and tinged with the crisp bite of pine needles and cold stone. As dawn broke over the towering cliffs and swirling mist, the search team moved in, boots crunching on gravel trails slick from last night's rain. They weren't here for sightseeing. They were here because a 10-year-old boy named Eli, rescued just days before, had described this place, a mine hidden behind trees nestled into a hillside. He said it smelled like wet rocks and iron. He said it had 6 other kids. And he said the man who ran it wore gloves to hide a scar on his hand. Matt Langley hadn't been able to sleep since hearing those words. Now he walked shoulder to shoulder with Shadow, his canine partner. Every step measured, every sense on alert. Shadow's nose twitched. He picked up his pace. The signal from the GPS-embedded video footage had pointed them to a cluster of abandoned mine shafts just outside a forgotten logging town. Most were sealed off decades ago, but 2 remained open, partly collapsed, used occasionally by hikers or curious teens. The satellite image showed one shaft with a path recently cleared of debris. That's where they went first. As they neared the mine, Shadow stopped abruptly and barked. A loud, sharp alert. His body stiffened, ears forward, eyes locked on the dark opening ahead. Matt turned to the team behind him. He's got something. They geared up, night vision, body cams, lightweight gear, and prepared for entry. Shadow with me, Matt said softly. The German Shepherd stepped forward without hesitation. Inside the shaft, the air grew cold and damp. The walls narrowed. The silence was eerie. No wind, no bird song, only the sound of boots against stone and Shadow's breathing. They reached a rusted-out steel door embedded into the rock wall. A keypad. Another layer of secrets. But Shadow didn't hesitate. He barked again, pawing at the door frame, circling the entrance. He could smell them. Matt stepped aside and let the tech team crack the lock. After a few tense minutes, a soft click echoed through the tunnel. The door creaked open. What they found behind it was worse than they imagined. The room was dimly lit by battery-powered lanterns. 6 sleeping mats were arranged in rows, each with a child on it, some asleep, some blinking up at the light, confused, dazed. One girl let out a frightened yelp and backed into the wall. Matt dropped to one knee. "It's okay. You're safe now. We're here to help." She stared at Shadow, who lowered his head and crawled forward, tail gently wagging. The girl reached out and touched his fur. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Then another boy stirred, then another. A third tried to run, but was gently caught by a trauma medic who wrapped him in a blanket. Every child was accounted for. But the man behind it all, gone. Until they heard the footsteps. Matt turned fast, weapon drawn. A figure appeared in the tunnel entrance. Slim build, dark hoodie, face half covered. Then came the voice, soft, calculated. "You shouldn't have brought the dog." Matt didn't hesitate. "Hands up now." The man didn't move. He was never supposed to find this place. But he did, impressive. Shadow growled. "I'll shoot," Matt warned. "Don't test me." The man smiled, eyes cold. "They're just kids. They would have had better lives." That was all it took. Shadow launched forward, snarling. Matt shouted, "Shadow, hold!" But the man turned to run. Too late. Shadow tackled him, pinning him against the tunnel wall, teeth at his throat. The man froze. Officers swarmed in and cuffed him. It was over. The real Monroe was in custody. The days that followed were a whirlwind of headlines, federal debriefings, and quiet moments no camera could capture. The children were reunited with relatives, foster homes, or placed into protected care. Some had been missing for months, one for nearly 2 years. Each had a different story. But they all had one thing in common. They were alive because of a dog who refused to look the other way. Matt watched from a distance as little Lily, the girl from the train station, played in a garden at the safe house. She was laughing, genuinely laughing. That sound had been absent from her life just a week ago. And beside her, Shadow. She threw a tennis ball. He chased it. Every time, he brought it back. A ceremony was held a week later at the city's police headquarters. Shadow was honored with a custom medal and a plaque for bravery and service. The mayor gave a speech. News outlets filmed every second. But Shadow didn't care about the cameras. He only cared about the kids who hugged him afterward and the scent of the trail that had finally ended. Later that night, Matt sat on his back porch, legs stretched out, a beer in his hand, and Shadow lying by his feet. "You did good, partner," he whispered. Shadow thumped his tail. Matt looked up at the stars. "There's always going to be more bad people," he murmured. "But we'll be ready, right?" Shadow didn't move, but his ears twitched. He was always ready. Thank you for following Shadow's story all the way to the end. Sometimes the most powerful heroes walk on 4 legs. What would you do if your dog led you to uncover something no one else noticed? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your stories.